Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope everybody had a fun Labor Day long weekend. We got the last serious blast of summer up here in the Northwoods. I think that it might have been the hottest days of the summer. Crazy, but fall's here now. The leaves are changing and they're falling. We're looking at an interesting film tonight, Third Eye Spies, a recent documentary that examines the CIA's top secret project, which utilized psychic abilities for the collection of vital intelligence in national security assets. It features some of that shadowy realm's best known personalities, including Russell Targ, Dean Radin, Uri Geller, and Hal Puthoff. So join us tonight as Jason and I will be dissecting this fascinating documentary only on Mysterious Library.
Good evening. It's another beautiful day in the library. I've actually been looking forward to this one for a while. We really would have addressed it sooner, but things just kept popping up. This is one I've been really interested to see for a while. Little known thing. I'm actually kind of into the whole psychic phenomena genre thing. So this is really one of those ones we've been meaning to do for a while, just never got the chance, and finally we had the opportunity, so I jumped on it. Yeah, I am a little hoarse and my lips are chapped because I'm severely dehydrated from the weekend. I was at the Dogman conference here in Fort Worth. Technically it was White Settlement, but Fort Worth is close enough for most people. It was a great time. Donnie came down. The Blondes and the Boos came down. Danielle Diva came down. So it was basically everyone but Rob from the Texas Front Porch crew all hanging out and doing stuff. Had a lot of fun. Text talked. I got a chance to do one of the to do the UAP conference sort of panel. Didn't get a chance to talk too long, but it was funny because I had texted Dean. I'm like, I can't remember the name of the co-author with Stanton Freeman that helped bring back the Roswell. And I couldn't remember his name. Dean's like, here it is. So it was a great time. It was a great time. I enjoyed it. I'm still recovering. We went out to Brown Springs on Monday. We were just walking all over because I was taking Donnie out there to see it. We made some videos. It's hot in Texas, and I'm just a little dehydrated from the weekend. The adventure continued until like about 5 o'clock this afternoon when I dropped him off at the airport. I actually dropped him off around 2 o'clock, and then I had other things to do. So I have been out and about doing things all weekend. I haven't really slept since Thursday, and yeah. So I'm recovering from all that.
Wow, too much partying, Jason.
I would like to be here to sit here and say, yeah, I was out, and we did go out and do things. I don't really drink at all, so yeah, that wasn't my issue. But we were out until like midnight most nights and doing things, and so yeah, I'm just tired and I'm dehydrated. It was really hot. We did a lot of walking, lots of things, and my body's like, you're not young anymore. Stop that. So
That's probably good for you. It gives you a blast of youth.
My knees are telling me I'm no longer young too.
Yeah, so. Tell me about it.
Yeah, like everything hurts, and I'm waking up. I'm like, I didn't do anything. I mean, it's like, yeah, I carried some things around. I did a lot of but I do a lot of walking. I work out. Like this should not hurt as much as it does. So yeah, but it was fun. Great time. And I got a chance to meet a lot of people, from the chat that you don't usually get a chance to meet in real life. So
that's great.
I had a lot of fun.
Good stuff. Sounds like a great weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything fun and exciting happen in Casa de Bertram?
Well, probably one of the most exciting days of my entire life, or one of the most memorable. Guess where I spent Saturday afternoon?
Okay, hold on. Was it Ray Palmer Jr.'s house?
Which was Ray Palmer's house originally. So the old Ray Palmer farmstead.
Nice.
Yes, and I got to. He's a wonderful human being, just a lovely man. But I'd met him once before briefly, but we spent I don't know 4 hours together. Just him telling me, stories about his dad, stories about Shaver, showing me memorabilia, the type of memorabilia that's that you just don't get to handle in your lifetime.
Yeah. Did you steal anything?
No, of course I didn't. But I did. I'll save it because it's related to a reveal at the end of this movie. And it's where so much of this stuff comes from. Again, from Palmer. The more you read about Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver, the more you can't hear anything in this field anywhere and not go, they were talking about this in the 1940s and now it's news today. I'll tell you what I did, which isn't a surprise I'll reveal, though. I got to hold Richard Shaver's longbow. He still has Richard Shaver's pre-recurve longbow. He's got film of Richard Shaver shooting it on the property. So I'm holding this longbow and I'm going, Shaver shot with this. Like it was a very surreal feel. There were several moments like that with just filled with like stepping into the farmhouse for the first time and thinking, this is where Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver used to hang out, like it was just a wonderful feeling sitting down at the dock where, the Palmer family used to give the local kids the famous swimming lessons because the Palmers were very kind to the community and very generous. And they swimming lessons for all the kids. So whenever you talk to anybody in the area, they're like, yeah, we used to do swimming lessons at Palmer's place. So just to see all these little bits of, Palmer, Shaverian, it was pretty phenomenal.
That's really interesting.
I have things to tell you because I want to reveal them in the documentary, which I won't reveal here. But there is one thing I'll talk about later when we hit it. But there's something quite spectacular. Like, I don't think anybody even knows it exists. And I was like, you kidding me? No, I've got it. I'm like, this is like staggering. This is like this is historical, momentous levels of Shaverian bliss. I'm like, I can't believe it exists. But
excellent.
Anyway.
So I actually had not nearly to the same degree, right? As you, but I actually had something very similar happen to me this morning. I was dropping off some things at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. I had Donnie with me, and I was able to show him around. I figured we'd be there for a few minutes. We ended up being there for like 2 hours. It was really cool. But so I knew they were putting a lab on there, and so we were walking around doing all that. And he's much further, like they're actually doing things really cool. But he's like, "Hey, since you're a fan of Jurassic Park," and the reason for it was they had I didn't even ask. I was just shocked, but they had like remember Jurassic Park 3? They had that 3D printed sort of replica of the Velociraptor larynx, and they can make sounds and all that. I was like, oh, hey, that's the thing. He's like, because they have a new 3D printer for things. He's like, since you're a fan of Jurassic Park, let me show you something. They have a new display. They have remember the Barbasol can and the stuff for the embryos from the original film?
Oh, yeah, sure I do.
They have the original prop now.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It was cool. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. There's 100 other things there that are really, really cool. And again, as an archaeologist, I love it. Or someone who studied archaeology, I love it. They have a replica of the Gutenberg press, which is my favorite thing, because I'm a printmaker at heart. But, and of course, you got the London hammer, which is the most important artifact, as far as I'm concerned, that we've found. But just to sit there and see the prop, right? The actual prop that was used in the movie was really, really cool. So, yeah, it sounds like we've had a really interesting really interesting weekend.
Yeah, it was a good one, that's for sure. I will never forget it. Let's put it that way.
I think we can put it that way.
But onto the film, I guess, before everybody here in the chat gets sick of us talking about our meaningful experiences, which hopefully they won't, but you never know. So this was your pick, this film. I'm glad you picked it. It was an interesting documentary. I do think that our regular listener and guest on Talking With a number of times, Ed Schultz, may have recommended this film to me as well, because Ed is also a remote viewer. He was known as the psychic priest back in the day. He was the exorcist for Ed and Lorraine Warren, and his book is upcoming is Confessions of a Psychic Priest, which has a lot of this kind of stuff in it. So I know Ed can remote view. I've done experiments with Ed remote viewing on the show, so I was aware of it. But it was your idea to do it, so I'm glad that you did, because it made me watch it.
Yeah, no. So this focuses on a lot of the narrative of this film. Focuses on, I have to write down names, y'all know that. Pat Price, he was one of the initial lead psychics. Well, and you know what? I don't even really want to say psychic. Lead remote viewer, because as anyone who's sort of in the field will say, yes, I mean, it is a psychic phenomena, but there seems to be some really interesting aspects we can get into later of remote viewing that I think sets it slightly apart from what most people traditionally think of as psychics, right? But I want to start with just the quality of this documentary is magnificent. I think it's very well put together. I know Dean, as a filmmaker himself, can appreciate the way they drove the narrative, the way that they told the story, right? And it was a really, like, from an aesthetic perspective, from a narrative perspective, I think it was very, very well done. Unfortunately, we've run across a few of those that we can't say, where that cannot be said.
Yeah, that's brother, that's the truth. I think it's worth noting too, because it's a documentary. A documentary is one of those things which audiences tend to look at as a truthful narrative, and anybody who's a documentarian filmmaker will assure you that they're not actually particularly truthful narratives. You're telling a story, and there's normally a point of view that you're telling it from, and you're more interested in, as you were saying, then driving a narrative than touching on facts and elements that might not fit that narrative. And of course, in many ways, the person who's front and center of the whole film is Russell Targ, but Russell Targ is also the producer of this film, which indicates that he would have had considerable say on those elements which were chosen to be shown, the direction of the narrative, the way that he was portrayed, the way the people that he liked were portrayed. So while every documentary, anybody whose media has a sense of media savviness knows you have to approach with a degree of caution, ones I think where the producer is also the major character in the story, we might have to approach examining that type of film even more cautiously than any other type of documentary, to be quite frank.
Yes. No, I completely agree. And we're definitely going to talk about that here in a moment. But you're right, because this isn't some random filmmaker who's like, I'm interested in this subject, or something came across his desk and I'm going to go pursue this story. It was, to your point, Russell Targ is driving this narrative. Again, I think Pat Price is sort of the central figure. The late Pat Price is the central figure, and his death drives a lot of the narrative here. But to your point, Russell Targ is the producer. He is essentially the star of the film, right? Even though it's sort of revolving a lot around what happened there with Mr. Price, he is the star, and so the view of the entire situation is very much colored by Mr. Targ and his his beliefs, his opinions, his thoughts on the entire situation and the people involved. Doesn't necessarily make him wrong, but we need to keep that. I would definitely recommend keeping that in the back of your mind, particularly when you see something that is as well made as this, right? It's kind of easy to sort of, with some of our other documentaries that we've reviewed that have less than stellar aesthetic and narrative qualities. This one's done very, very well. They do a very good job of pushing this out, so it's very, very enjoyable. But do keep in the back of your head, hey, this is a bit of a jaundiced view of the events in question.
Oh yeah, I mean, when it definitely looks at Price, particularly in the first act, but the people with the most screen time, without a shadow of a doubt, are Targ and then Puthoff. And Puthoff's another interesting cat, of course, because in many ways, Targ and he were the main partners, the main push at Stanford Research Institute with this initial remote viewing type experiments, and then the projects, and then them being, I suppose, sought after or by the CIA and various other intelligence agencies. But so it's Targ's and it's Puthoff's movie, and it's very sympathetic to both of them. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be sympathetic to both of them, but those people have very specific belief systems, are entangled in other ideas as well. As it mentions at the very end, Hal Puthoff, of course, has been one of the major players in disclosure, being part of the whole breaking story from 2017 onward, and a member of To the Stars Academy, and supposedly bought into the whole disclosure project, and supposedly, having access to the metamaterials and I mean, all of this type of narrative. It's another mystery. So there's all these weird internal secret government mysteries, and you start to see some of them coalesce. So there are players like Puthoff who have their feet in the UFO story and in the remote viewing story. Edgar Mitchell, of course, who's the astronaut who had his type of cosmic epiphany when he was in space, and I believe he was a regular guest on Art Bell, as incidentally were most of these guys. It was like a time travel. It was like going back in time. The only person missing was old Ed Dames. I mean, I think Ed Dames has passed maybe, but they certainly had other people who'd passed who were featured. I'm not sure why Ed Dames was left out. Maybe because he went to such extreme levels, they didn't want to associate with Dames. Because it's weird to me to do a history about remote viewing without talking about one of the biggest popularizers of it. I kept waiting for an old Ed Dames bit to come up throughout the movie, and I'm like, where's Ed?
Yeah, I did the same thing. I had the exact same thought.
Yeah. He never came. And maybe it's because he'd start to talk about, remote viewing the devil, or remote viewing the Zeta Reticulans, or remote viewing the end of the world. Like he was casting out to all kinds of levels of extremeness. Perhaps and that's again about controlling the narrative. Perhaps if you start talking about that kind of messaging instead of, well, we found a Soviet plane in Africa, or we saw this secret base, people who are watching it with somewhat of a skeptical, if open mind, go, well, this is interesting. But if you start going, he remote viewed Satan, or he remote viewed the ETs, then those people might walk out the back of the cinema, So again, it's controlling the narrative of the remote viewing story.
Well, and again, I want to get into another element of control where it's like, I can, you're you're definitely trying to color the thoughts of the viewer on a particular matter. I want to get to that in a second, because I know there's one part of the movie I know you actually probably really, really liked. I want to talk about that in a little bit too. But just getting back to one of the things they do very, very well is they do put forward the evidence that kept this project moving for decades, right? They do put that information front, face front, and in a very good light, and which it deserves to be. I want to make something very, very clear. Really what's going to come towards the end. There's always the and then the But I want to be very, very clear. What's about to happen comes just from Jason's mouth, and that's it. I have no problem believing in the reality of psychic phenomena. I've experienced it there. And again, with the work that was done remote viewing, it is very, very clear that it is a real phenomena. The problem is everyone often in this community is if you don't walk lockstep, then you don't believe it at all, right? It's like, no, that's definitely not what's happening here. And again, the operations that they did, Stanford experiments, it is clear this is a real phenomena that absolutely exists. It is real. I know remote viewers. And it is absolutely a real phenomenon. So I just want to put that on the table. Dean probably thinks it's all crap. So, you send him your mad emails, right?
Well, I'll say something quickly about remote viewing and my belief or lack of belief in it. Ed Schultz is somebody I respect phenomenally. We've had him do remote viewing experiments on Talking Weird back in the day, which were very spot on, to be honest. And one day I was on a phone call with Ed. I might have told this story either on Talking Weird or on Mysterious Library before, but it's more relevant now than ever. I was on just a personal phone call with Ed. And he said, I want to do a remote viewing experiment with you now. I said, great, let's do it. He said, but I want you to be the remote viewer. And I said, Yeah. And he started to talk me through it. But at the very beginning, before I even really did all of the process, as soon as I knew he wanted me to see something, right, or go somewhere, and he had a coordinate for me that I had to clear my mind and, try to pick up on, I instantly had this sense of a Western imagery, like guns and cowboy hats and horses and Western movies is immediately what I started thinking about. And I told him, this is what, and then he said, okay, well, clear, and he guided me through, I guess, the way you do in a controlled remote viewing. And then I think I started to try to overthink my initial images. So my initial thing was just cowboy Western stuff. That was my boom, like this weird flash. And the more I thought, I was trying to think, well, what else could there be? Maybe there are fences and maybe there's this and that. But then Ed showed me what it was. And it was a photo of a wall which had cowboy hats and cowboy guns. And so my initial impression of a Western, I mean, the chance of me hitting that out of nowhere instantly like that without any leading, suggestions from Ed. Just the second he said he wanted me to do it, I saw it straight away, or I saw Western things straight away, indicates to me that there is something there. Now, could that have been a total fluke? It's the only time I've ever done remote viewing. It's the only time I ever tried to do it. So I do think there is something there. Now, how usable that is in intelligence circles, I don't know. Certainly the film has people suggest that it is, and it also plays some older clips from people in various CIA directors and the like who said they didn't think it was feasible.
And including President Carter. Yeah. So this is, and again, I said everything up front because I wanted to be very, very clear that when there are some things I'm going to say later on in this episode that maybe he hates it, or he thinks it's not real, or he thinks it's fake. That's not what I'm saying. There is a reality here. Psychic phenomena is absolutely real, and I do think it's important that it is studied. And again, the work that they did, I think is remarkably valid and very, very important. Now, on with the rest of the show, where I start beating up people. The movie does a great job of putting forward like you said, you have President Carter speaks about it in an event where we needed, and where the only way we could find this lost bomber was psychic information, right? Remote viewing. There's a lot of stories where we are seeing instances where, this happened. They got the information that was needed or helpful. One of the stats they throw out there, though, that for me was really sort of leaning, was they point out that about 50% of their target, like the total targets that they did, right, led to important information, and 85% of that 50% was positive, meaning it was allowing them to gain legitimate information about the targets. The thing is, though, the way they kind of say it, you realize if you're paying attention, it's 85% of the 50%, not 85% of the 100%. The way it's again, I'm not saying it's deliberately presented in a deceitful way, but it's also, they don't clarify that point either. And there are elements of the phenomena that they just didn't address at all, which goes back to the whole point that this particular documentary is definitely leaning a particular way. And it's just something to have in the back of your head while you watch it. Just when you're listening to it, just understand, hey, there's some details that's being left out. To Dean's point, there are a lot of people who popularized the remote viewing phenomena that are just completely omitted from this because, to Dean's point, things got weird. And the thing is, remote viewing can get weird. I know people who, they talk about the fact that they encounter beings. They're trained and told to stay away from them, but there's other things that come with psychic phenomena that they completely gloss over. They don't even address as if it's a reality. It is, and my position is, I've had people ask me, it's like, should I do remote viewing? I've never advised anyone to do it. I do think, and again, I think there's a difference between, say, remote viewing and taking of drugs to, astral project, things like that. I do think it is a very different thing. I don't have a problem with that with remote viewing. However, I will say I don't recommend it because, for the same reason, I don't recommend you jump in and swim with piranha or sharks, right? Even if you can do it and everything's fine, you are not at the top of that food chain. And that food chain isn't necessarily addressed in this documentary at all. Towards the end, you get a little bit of it, but they really sort of hide those other elements in this documentary. They're just not addressed. It's always very, how do I say this? It's kept kind of vanilla, to be honest, when it comes to the genuinely, to the genuine aspects of it. Again, Cryptid Huntress, she'll tell you, hey, it's, there's other things out there. It's not just us out there. And that's why I always say, look, it's like anything else. I don't recommend you skydive without taking a course, right? I don't recommend handling a gun unless you've been trained. But unfortunately, this is an aspect of the phenomena that's completely ignored in this documentary. And you could argue maybe it's because, well, that's a whole other kettle of fish, and they're trying to address just the reality of the phenomena. I think that's a valid position, but it's never addressed at all. And I do think it's a massive missing piece in this narrative.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that ties into a little bit with what I was saying before about why an Ed Ames mightn't have been welcomed in the documentary. But at the same time, the film, for all its presentation of almost this scientifically verifiable procedure throughout the first 2.5 acts of the movie, by the denouement of the film, the New Age flag comes out to fly proudly. I mean, at the end of the film, it's all about, this is expanded consciousness and we can all be one, So it's weird. For the beginning, it's like we're not going into the really weird ET strange, demonic entities kind of world. And in fact, Joe McMoneagle kind of laughs at the senator who once told him, this is devil's work, boy. And some other senator hugged him and said, you're doing the God's work, boy. And he said, well, what is it, God or the devil? So he kind of made mockery of that religious suggestion by two obviously senators with different views on the spiritual nature of remote viewing. But by the end, the New Age flag is flying, and remote viewing is part of this altered consciousness experience, which is going to take humanity to the next level. So it plays this respectable game for most of it, and at the end, it's just boop, those New Age flags fly up, and okay, well, I understand what the purpose of this is now. Then,
right, and that's the point, right? The phenomena itself is different from the agendas of those making the film. Just like whether it's Bigfoot, living pterosaurs, shaver, the agenda of the filmmakers is always different from the phenomena, and we need to keep that in mind. So yeah, by the time you get to the end of the film, I'm sitting here listening to it. It's like, okay, I know where we're going, right? Like you said, it's the hippy dippy moral of the story, as you could say it, and which again. That's the message that they want to put out, and that's perfectly fine. And like I said, the one thing the movie does very, very well is showcase that this is a real phenomena. But then you have, the end where they're sort of resolving. Like you said, you call it I've always called it the denouement, where they're saying, hey, this is what it means, right? And this is the importance. And of course, like you said, that's when it gets into their overall worldview. What's the actual agenda? And I think that's their point. But it's also for me, that's colored by the fact that I know that they omitted quite a bit about the reality of the phenomena. And that feels deceptive. One section though I know you loved, I want to talk about that. We can come back to this idea here in a second, but one section I know you probably really appreciated, and as far as the phenomenon itself, and I think really speaks to a lot of what we talk about on this show, is it's actually right after that scene where he's like, well, which one bothers you more? The one who says it's the devil's work, or the one who says it's God's work? Which one of those ideas bothers you more? And they go more into the scientific community and its opposition to this phenomena, and just saying that there's nothing beyond the material world, right? And that one of the main issues is that the mainstream scientific community, and which does include elements of the CIA and the other intelligence operations that had opposing views of all this, start raining down this fight between the science, right? And whether or not this can even be, examined or explained, in that the scientific community itself is also at war with certain realities of our universe.
Yeah, it requires a serious paradigm shift to think that consciousness isn't localized. Now I'm sounding like the end of the movie, but it does require a shift in the way science views things, and perhaps some levels of quantum physics. Again, I don't want to pretend like I know what quantum physics is. Probably 10 people in the world really understand it, but I have a vague idea of its suggestions of, particles being in separate locations and being entangled and all this kind of thing. So maybe some of the high ends of quantum physics might suggest that consciousness can follow the route of particles, right? So maybe we're not that far from it, but I think most mainstream science would be reluctant to think that consciousness is non-localized, because for starters, then you're almost at a point of proving life after death, because if my consciousness isn't dependent upon my body, if my consciousness can leave my body and go other places, then does that mean after I die, it can just leave my body if it's not, so that it opens up a big can of worms. So of course, the way the paradigms in the various sciences are protected, something this shattering to what people have understood to be the nature of reality for a long time is going to get pushed back by the sciences. I think what to me is, although that was interesting, what to me I think is most interesting is that there's mention in there by it's a senior CIA analyst that they brought into Stanford. What was his name? He's a guy fly fishing in it. I can't remember the guy's name though.
Oh, was that not Joe? No. I forgot him. Yeah, I forgot to write.
Anyway, he was saying the program still goes on pretty much, right? I think that's who was saying it, and I'm sure it would. I'm sure if they spent this much time on it, and we often talk about the black budgets and the holes of what goes on in the various intelligence communities. There's no doubt that there's still with or without the Stanford Research Institute being involved, with or
Mhm.
without Hal Puthoff, and with or without
Yeah.
any of the other players in the movie still being involved, I have very little doubt that there would be segments within various intelligence agencies still playing with this kind of thing. Because as the
Mhm.
movie makes clear, it wasn't just the CIA. That's kind of the setup. But then we find out, well, the
Yeah.
Army's doing it. And I think that's what Ed Dames was in and Joe
Mhm.
McMoneagle, right? They were Army guys. And so there's CIA
Yeah.
guys, there's Army guys, there's the DIA guys, there's all these different
Mhm.
organizations playing with it and spending money on it. So I'm sure a lot of it is still operating there. And so
Yeah.
that it's interesting to
Mhm.
think that what are these programs doing today? If it is replicable, and if they are able to hone it down, and they are able to get the Ken Prices or whatever his name, or the high-end operatives, or if they're able to, as the film started to also suggest, which was really fascinating, that they could pull people you never would have expected, and then you can, or
Mhm.
they might have had certain qualities, and then you can grow them into a remote viewing agent because they
Yeah.
tick certain boxes. I'm sure that kind of stuff's continued. I'd have very little doubt if they don't have. I'd have little doubt if what they're doing now isn't far in advance of what they were doing in the 70s.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is and okay, as you like to do, we like to go back a little bit further, right? Contrary to popular belief, this was not the first time our military, had addressed psychic phenomena or less, or we can say non-material intelligence gathering. It's just the facts. Like we always sort of see the Stanford experiments and Project Stargate and all that as the sort of the beginning of this thing. And it's like slow thine roll there, kiddo. Yes, for remote viewing specifically, 100%. But the United States government has a history of doing, shall we say, methods that are outside of the accepted mainstream intelligence gathering. For example, the 1947 FBI document that was released on FBI.gov that everyone likes to point to because it's about UFOs, right? At the very end, the one thing I think that people always seem to overlook is the end of the paper. It is discussing and says explicitly that the information within that paper was derived by occult means. And a large percentage of that paper is dedicated to the idea that a lot of these UAPs or UFOs are not from our realm of existence, right? It's very, very clear that the United States government has been using these kinds of intelligence gathering operations for a very, very long time. This is just sort of the official. This is where we start getting more, I guess, a more scientific or materialist approach to it and documenting it. I do know that one of the things I found very, uh, again, going back to the whole idea of quantum physics, one of the things I found a little amusing was when they talk about how, oh, well, it's, the Soviets were very quick to jump on this material because for them, even though it was a material world, they sort of had this materialist worldview. There was an aspect of a lot of Lenin's writings and Stalin's writings that allowed them to sort of pursue that anyway. Whereas a lot of the conversation around quantum physics is about creating I would argue, almost an illusion of materialism. It's like, oh, it's scientifically acceptable because we've created this. We're trying to explain it in a materialist way, even though, like you said, at the end they do, start leaning more towards the non-materialist view of things. But it is it's that whole section I find a little amusing because they're trying to find a way to rationalize it within a very tangible material universe while using quantum physics as sort of like that loophole instead of saying, no, it's actually very suggestive. And again, to a lot of the people speaking in the film, they do say, look, consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, right? It does exist somewhere else, but there's still this leaning into a materialist worldview in trying to figure out how to use quantum physics to explain it. And it's like, you're kind of avoiding the obvious here, is that maybe maybe this means that there is a realm of reality that we are just completely unfamiliar with, and that our language doesn't even properly explain, and that trying to look at it within a materialist scientific worldview is wrong. I like to point out, one of the things I've talked about ad nauseum here, is that you go back 600 years and try to explain germ theory. They'd look at you like you were a nut job. Not because of any religious thing, but because that idea wasn't even on the table, because the first microscope had not been invented. We're still, in many ways, trying to figure out what makes us sick without a microscope, without this idea even being on the table. What idea is not on our table? And we're trying to explain this phenomena using the accepted ideas, instead of saying, hey, there's other ideas out here. Maybe the ideas we don't even know the ideas that we can have, because that possibility is just not on the table, because we're trying to look at things that we can measure and poke a stick at.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what some of this is. It's letting us peek, beyond the veil of the physical. It's interesting you mentioned the Soviet aspects before. Ed Schultz mentioned the book Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, and certainly the documentary talks about Soviet experiments which went even further with attempts to strangle and kill people remotely. And that leads into a very interesting little aside, which is it's one of the most fascinating bits of the film, and it only takes up probably 2 or 3 minutes in the first act. And that's when Russell Targ talks about his connections with Sidney Gottlieb early on. Gottlieb, of course, was the head of the CIA's assassination program, as well as the head of MK Ultra. So he was very interested in what was the potential of remote viewing, and he wanted to dose remote viewers with LSD. And I think Targ and Puthoff had to tell him, well, you need to have a control of the conscious, rational mind as well when you do this. So the LSD probably won't help. And apparently he was, well, Sidney Gottlieb kind of, we accepted that, and he moved on. But what's interesting, and I think it's Targ who says it in passing, he's like, well, Sidney Gottlieb's Jewish, but he's as bad as any of the doctors experimenting in Auschwitz. The only difference is he's not targeting anybody for race or religion. I forget the exact turn of phrase, but it's like he's an equal opportunity murderer or something. Yeah, it's something like that. Like he'd hit anybody.
Yeah, he was not. He was not a fan of Gottlieb, and nor should anyone be a fan of Gottlieb, all things considered.
But see, that my point, I guess, is maybe those type of people were interested the same way the Soviets were, of getting their hands on this type of technology to weaponize it. And of course, there's things like, what's the film Men Who Stare at Goats, which is based on a book based on real programs as well within the army, right? About their attempts to use psychic powers as a type of weapon. So this is something which has clearly been experimented with in various nations. And I wouldn't be surprised, whether it's successful or whether it works or not, that there aren't still one or more units in various components or parts of the very divided, US intelligence and military services who have, Operation Psychic Kill or something,
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. We know. Well, we know they did. I mean, like that's sort of the other things. We know that they did try that. Real quick before I'm going to forget if I don't do it, because the weekend has caught up with me. You can probably hear it in my voice. Who do you think killed Pat Price?
Well, I think the film suggests the Soviets took Pat Price out as the suggestion, because they tie the Pat Price thing in with the facts that the Soviets had developed some similar way of, whacking people. But to be honest, I have no idea. I don't have a theory on who killed Pat Price. It could have been us. It could have been the Soviets. It could have been anybody. It could have been Pat. I mean, maybe Pat Price just, his heart gave out or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what's your theory? I think you have a theory.
That's the worst. Well, like you said, it leans very hard into the idea that maybe the Soviets killed him, right? But they also sort of, and there's a lot of saying, no, the CIA wouldn't do this. But it's like, I kind of think there's a much better argument for the CIA being the one to take him out, because of the situation with, he was revealing things to his priest, kind of a thing. and they could have just said, yeah, he's not worth the risk. Also considering, what was it? Hella Hammond, right? She was supposed to be the control, which brings us back to the topic of you trying remote viewing. She had proven actually more capable than Price. So I could see them very easily saying, you know what? He's not as controllable as we'd like him to be. So let's just go ahead and take him out and just be done with it. The worst part is he literally could have just died of natural causes, and just because of the situation, it looks weird, right? It's kind of the same situation with Schneider, right? Where it's like it could have been something, again, I'm going to try and keep it family friendly, but I think we all know sometimes solo happy fun time can go wrong for certain people who are into certain things with restricting airflow. So it's entirely possible that's what it was, or that it was suicide, and just the way it was handled by the cops genuinely makes you think something weird happened, or something weird happened. Like, the problem is it looks for all the world like something weird happened, and you throw in the context of what Schneider was saying and the other people who died around the time of his death, it makes something weird happening much more likely, right? So in the same way with Price, it's like there's enough there where it's like if it was natural causes or something along those lines, it actually makes it very hard to believe that because of the overall situation of his life at the time. That context actually makes him being killed far more likely. Now, again, the question is by whom? And I could honestly see the CIA or maybe not even the CIA proper, but our intelligence agency saying, he's not an irreplaceable, individual. He's easily replaced, and we don't like, he's not as trustworthy as we would like him to be, or he's not as controllable as we like him to be. That's another aspect. Not necessarily trustworthy, but controllable. Let's just nip this one in the bud and we'll focus on someone else. I think there's a better argument for that than the Russians, because the Russians would just try to flip him more than kill him. Honestly, I think that's sort of my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's either are possible. I mean, I heard a story that he'd been asked to remote view the caverns, and the Darrow shot a mind needling ray into his head to confuse him, and it triggered something. His heart exploded in his chest.
So that's your theory? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's as good as any other one.
You know what? You're probably right. You're probably, yeah. So okay. In all seriousness, right? How do we know it wasn't something like that? Maybe neither the CIA or Russia had anything to do with his death, but his death wasn't natural causes either. Again, going back to my point earlier about we live in a supernatural ecosystem. We just do. There are beings out there you have to protect yourself from. Again, which is why I never, ever encourage anyone to practice anything necessary in the psychic world, because, again, you enter a food chain you're not at the top of. That having been said, to Jessica's point, a lot of remote viewers are trained to protect themselves. However, this was very, very early in this process, and he may have looked somewhere, in his experimentation that he shouldn't have looked, and attracted the attention of something he couldn't protect himself from. And that could have led to his death, which is why it looks suspicious, but it wasn't us. It wasn't a human being that had anything to do with it. So so now we have three options: natural causes, and just because the context looks suspicious. He was killed by an intelligence agency of some, of some faction. We just don't know which one, or it ain't neither of those. It's someone else or something else. That
I'll give you one other one. He was in Vegas, right? He used his powers to trick a casino. They realized what he was doing.
Yes.
That might be the most plausible of all. I mean, they fix you in Vegas in those days. That was when it was real. I mean, I think now it's fairly clean, but in those days, they didn't call the police, man. They just sorted the problem
they took
themselves.
care of you. Yes. Okay, so here's the thing. That's actually a really, really good point. Give me 2 seconds on that. Because, again, clean and Vegas today is still... Tactics have changed. I'll say it that way.
This is still what year did he? Did he?
It was late 70s.
Yeah,
late
I
70s,
mean,
early
Frank
80s.
Sinatra was probably still singing at the
Yeah.
Sands. in
Oh no,
those
yeah,
days.
like Sinatra was still operational. So yeah, it's entirely possible. But here's the thing: I would think, sort of again, why I'm not a fan of the Russian theory. Again, I can't discount it at all. But the reason I kind of look on it is the Russians would have tried to flip him. I could easily see a mob boss saying, "Hold up, he can do this. Let's have him on our payroll." I could easily see that. But that being said, it's also not hard to imagine a mobster going, I don't want no, I don't want no witch. Why did I make him Texan? I can't do a Chicago accent or a New York accent, but some Italian mafioso being like, I don't want to, some psychic witch reading my cards. Go take care of them, Guido. I could see
Yeah,
that. I think you've got a valid point.
it'd be interesting to see if he'd been playing at the casinos or what he'd been pulling down.
Uh-huh.
Anybody done that research? Mind you, it probably wouldn't exist anymore anyway, the paper trail, but who knows? Nothing is fun because a man died, but that's the most kind of fun theory, really, that the mob did it.
Yep. Yeah. Well, now we've got like what are we up to? 4 or 5 options?
Yeah, something like that. It's getting more and more.
Well, I think the moral of the story is don't make enemies of the United States government, Russian government, or the mafia, or apparently demons.
Or the Darrow.
Or the Darrow. Yeah. Or the Darrow. Oh, so Patricia said she stayed in the sands in her first hotel stay in Vegas. And I've never been to Vegas. So y'all,
it used to be great. It's a little bit different now, but back in those days, even back in the early 90s, it was still great. The last time I was there, it was, I don't know, very sanitized. It didn't feel as Vegas.
It didn't feel like Vegas.
No.
Yeah. Okay. But I can't. She has the logo. I can't remember the word for it. In my mouth is dying on me. For Patricia, so I wanted to throw it up there because she's a member, and I really appreciate you being a member of this channel, Patricia. We really do. But yeah, I've never been to Vegas, specifically. It is on my list. I think I need to at least go once. Here's the thing: I don't gamble. I've done it once. I'm remarkably unlucky. I mean, catastrophically unlucky. So I never gamble with my money, only my life.
I got married in Vegas, by the way. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that.
I got married in the Little White Chapel. I mean, I'm divorced now, but that's where I got married. I think Elvis got married there. Everybody got married there back in the day. I'm a big fan of. I used to be a big fan of Vegas. Now it doesn't have the same appeal it used to when I was a younger man.
Yeah. Have you ever watched the original Ocean's 11? Not the modern remakes, but the original one with Sinatra.
Years ago, I think, a long time ago.
It is. If you've never watched the original, I say this to our audience, if you've never watched the original Rat Pack version of Ocean's 11, I highly recommend it. It is a good up close look at that sort of classic Las Vegas thing, the thing that you really think of Vegas, sort of the heyday of it being before everything got commercialized and sanitized. It's a lot of fun is a lot of fun. Oh, that's right, the Sands was demolished. Yeah, I heard about that.
The Sands is long gone. When I was on my earlier trips there as a young man,
I'll mark that off my list.
The downtown area the Fremont experience hadn't started yet with all the kind of the covering of Fremont Street. So you could look out. You could sit at a bar at a casino and you could look down Fremont Street, and it probably looked very much like it had 30 years ago. Indeed, the wonderful Michael Mann TV show, Crime Story, which Michael Mann's the guy who did. Is that his name, Michael Mann? I hope I haven't got his name wrong. The guy who did Miami Vice. Is it Michael Mann?
Oh, yeah. I know you're talking about. Yeah.
He did a show called Crime.
I marked it down. I can't go to Sands anymore. It's been demolished.
But he made a show called Crime Story, which was set in. It was a very clever show. It started in Chicago, and it followed with the mob and the police who were trying to stop the mob to Vegas, and then it moved on and on and on. And anyway, when the season they were in Vegas, the lead character Michael Torello, who was like, I don't know, the police captain or something, went to have a drink in a bar in Vegas, which still overlooked the old Fremont Street bit. And when I finally went there well, I'd already been there a couple of times as a younger man, but when I finally went there as a drinking age human being, I went, where was that bar he would have been sitting in? I can't even remember what casino it was, one of the hotel
Yeah.
casinos. And I went and found the window, and you could sit where they'd shot us.
Really?
And it still looked
wow.
like it still looked in the like 60s, you know. And it was, so I went and sat there, and I did the whole bit because he's talking to himself when he's out by himself. And I did the Michael Torello back and forth speech that he does because I was such a fan of that show. I won't do it here. But so, yeah, my point is Vegas still used to feel in the early 90s, it still had that old Vegas feel. And then they kind of covered Fremont Street and they tried to turn it into Disneyland or something, you know, so it's not quite the same anymore.
That's what it is. Like, it's been commercialized, it's been sanitized. I mean, heck, that's happening to Texas. Again, Donnie was here, so he saw it. Like, you go to it's just become, parts have become touristy, and it's hard to, it's just not, it's not the same. Again, love Texas. I don't plan on leaving under any circumstances. But it's like, you take someone to a place and you're like, but it's kind of commercialized. Let me take you someplace else, right? But it's like, this is where it used to be. Like, I don't even recognize downtown Dallas anymore. I can still get around, but there's all this new stuff, and it's a very different vibe. It has a very different feel. A lot of things are sanitized for the tourists, and it's just like it's the artificialness of it, right? Like it. So Donnie actually, let's see if I can pull it up here. Probably can't find it, but he talks about how, here it is. He learned that people in Texas like to drive ridiculous looking pickup trucks with so many random stickers on them. Here's the thing.
That's rural America, Donnie.
Well, hold on. Because what he's talking about are those ones where they're jacked up like stupidly high.
I have a car dealership on my way. Yeah, I have a car dealership on my way between here and town, halfway in the middle of nowhere. That's the trucks they sell there. It's just an independent mom and pop car dealership in the middle of nowhere, and they sell those jacked up trucks. So they're popular in rural America.
Right. But to your point, those are the ones that are used because of the job, right?
I know,
like there's
off road and party and go hunting or whatever. Yeah, they use them off road. That's true. It's not downtown.
The ones he's talking about are never, like, they've never left concrete. They have weird lights on them and all this.
Oh gosh,
it's the illusion of being, Texan. Like, I don't wear a Texas hat or a Texas cowboy hat because it's not actually a real cowboy hat. It's a different kind
Texan hat right now, by the way. This is a Texan brand.
Yeah, it is. No, it
Texan
is.
Than you are. Poser.
Yeah,
I'm the poser though, because I'm not even in Texas. So there you go.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing. It's like, being a Texan is, but then there's they want to look like they belong, but they're making themselves look like what they think other people think Texans should look like. Again, jacked up trucks are very useful. I know. I've driven them. I've ridden in them. Off-roading. There are places where you need a jacked up truck to get to. However, the ones that he's talking about, it's all for show. It's all for, these are people these are kids and people who've never left a paved road. They don't even know what gravel roads look like, right? It's the illusion of the thing versus the reality of the thing, and it's brand, hitting everywhere.
I guess. It's brand. I mean, it's the same way that. It's the same way that, I don't know, when Nirvana got big, kids who were upper middle class families wore torn flannelette shirts. Do you know what I mean? Forgetting that the grunge movement was started by poor, almost street teenagers in Seattle. So they wore that because that was their reality. It wasn't because they could go to, I don't know, whatever the trendy store was, the Gap or whatever, and buy one with holes in it. It was a different. Right. So it's brand. Everybody, not everybody, a lot of people succumb to brand. I have to tell a quick story though, because I know we're getting towards the very end. At the end of the documentary, they talk about Hal Puthoff being part of the type of unfolding reintroduction of the UAP mystery into popular consciousness from 2017 onwards. And they talk about the metamaterials that Puthoff and other people are meant to have handled. I believe some of those metamaterials date back to Art's parts. Art Bell had these things shipped to him. And I think that's part of what the metamaterials are. I don't know if they have other ones as well. I don't know. But you know what was the original metamaterial in ufology? The very first one in the flying saucer era.
No.
The Maury Island incident. Debris.
Oh, yeah.
June 21. Harold Dale's out in his boat, supposedly, in Puget Sound near Maury Island. He sees 6
Mhm.
saucers or donut-shaped craft. They kind of had holes in them, and one
Yeah.
of them pours out all this slag out of it. It's kind of wobbling, and it kills his dog and
Yeah.
damages his boat and goes
Mhm.
out onto the shore of Maury Island. Anyway, Fred Chrisman, who's friends with Harold Dahl, various stories say he was his
Mhm.
supervisor, other things say he was his boss or his coworker, whatever. Fred
Mhm.
Chrisman goes and collects some of these samples, and who does Fred Chrisman send the samples to? Ray Palmer.
Really?
Yeah, Ray Palmer got the Maury Island incident things. The next people who Fred Chrisman gave more samples to were the 2 Air Force officers who crashed flying back to base with the Maury Island samples, and they
Mhm.
died. But the original samples were posted to Ray Palmer. So when I'm with
Hmm.
Ray Palmer's son, Raymond B. Palmer, this weekend, what does he pull out of his pocket and show me?
No.
What do I get to hold?
Really?
Yeah, almost the holy grail of ufology, the remaining Maury Island piece. It was a very
Wow.
strange sensation holding that piece. And knowing the historic, whether it happened or whether it didn't happen,
Right, yeah,
understanding the
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
historical significance of this piece of material, that this is the first UFO crash incident in America, that this is what Kenneth Arnold investigates, this is what kills 2 Air Force officers, this is what gets sent to Ray Palmer by Fred Chrisman, who'd also said he'd battled the Darrow in the caves in a previous letter to Amazing Stories. And here I am sitting next to Raymond B. Palmer, Raymond A. Palmer's son, next to their beautiful pond outside the original office that Palmer worked in, the chicken coop as it used to be
That's
called,
nuts.
and I'm holding a piece of the Maury Island saucer
Wow.
or the
That is
saucer debris.
dude, that's
Yeah,
nuts.
you've got no idea what it was. For somebody who's been writing, who spent 20 years of his life thinking about this stuff, it was a surreal little experience, I'll tell you that.
Wow.
Yep.
That's insane. All right. Well, there you go, guys. You heard it. So that's definitely making it into your documentary, I'm assuming.
I hope so. We're still talking
Okay.
to Raymond B.
I
He's a
gotcha.
lovely man, though, so we'll hopefully work it out, because it'd be a great coup to have him show it on screen. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's wow. That's amazing. Oh, thank you, Patricia. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And I'm glad
Thank
you
you.
got to visit the Sands as well while it was still there. I did as a
Yeah,
boy as well. When I was in Vegas, I got to visit with my folks.
I didn't. Yeah, I mean, you see the sands in the old movies, and yeah, you're right. That's right. I did hear it was destroyed. I guess, yeah, that's
I think they
again, it goes
demolished it
back
to
to
build
history.
something else, right? I think that's what happened.
Yeah,
They demolished. There's something else there now. I think I can't even remember. There is a
something else.
story to it, but I can't remember what the story is.
Yeah, I think it was what. Yeah, now that you think, yeah, man. Okay, well, it goes back to gentrification, I suppose. We all have to things change, but yeah, that's pieces of history, and we're all, history is that thing we're all going through. But apparently, you can look back and forward, according to
Russell Targ.
Russell Targ, and I'm not about to say he's wrong because
No,
I've
nor am I.
experienced it. Yeah, because I've experienced it. So, guys, thank you for putting up with this with my voice for this episode. Thank you for watching the goblins down in the Mysterious Library. Appreciate you as well. You can watch this movie for free on Tubi. I recommend it. It is worth watching. Just again, keep in mind it is colored towards a very specific perspective. And keep that in your mind. But there's so much good information in here that it's worth noting, because the simple fact is, where I think we would all 100% agree, Dean, I, and the filmmakers, is this is a reality. Psychic phenomena is real. Our reality is not what we think it is. And moreover, it's far more complicated than we think it is. And things like psychic phenomena are a testament to the lack to the less than exclusively materialist worldview. We can say it that way. That our consciousness and that reality itself is just not restrained by this crude matter as Yoda would say, but rather that we are supernatural beings within a supernatural world, and that this is just one aspect of it.
Yeah, it's worth watching. Check it out. Form your own
Yeah.
opinions. Don't just listen to Jason and I. But I think, as Jason said,
No, listen to me exclusively.
be conscious of the fact that it does show a specific perspective. As you can tell, it's very honest that Targ's the producer. You see it right there up at the front.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating history, and as any documentary, it has to show some things and not show some things, because there's a time limit on what you can show when you're doing a history that spans like 50 years or something. So what are you going to show? What aren't you going to show? So yeah, check it out.
Five administrations that this program was used, to our knowledge.
And they're still talking about things today as well. So they're still talking about remote viewing stuff today. So it goes like literally up till almost when the documentary shot, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, this is, it's worth the watch. I mean, definitely give it a watch. It's fun. It's very well done. Can't recommend it enough. But Dean, me, and all the gremlins, goblins, orcs, elves, fae, djinn in the Mysterious Library, we'll catch y'all behind the card catalog. Oh, Third Eye Spies, Grasshopper. It's Third Eye Spies. We'll catch y'all next week.